May 16, 1937, 11:30 at night. The Three Forks store sits at the intersection of three dirt roads in Robinsonville, Mississippi, where the delta heat doesn't break even after sundown. Inside, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and the sweet sour smell of corn whiskey mixed with sweat. Wooden floorboards creak under the weight of Saturday night dancers, their feet shuffling to music that seems to come from somewhere deeper than strings and wood. Robert Johnson sits on a wooden chair tilted back against the wall, his guitar cradled in his lap like something precious and dangerous all at once. He's 26 years old, thin as a fence post, with hands that seem too large for his wrists and eyes that never quite settle on anything for long. His shirt is buttoned to the collar despite the heat, and his hat, a brown fedora with a silk band, sits low over his forehead, casting his face in shadow even in the lamplight. He's playing, but he's not really here, not all of him. The song pouring from his guitar is one nobody's heard before, one he'll record in a few months as Hellhound on My Trail, though tonight it has no name. His fingers move across the fretboard with a speed that makes some of the older men in the room shake their heads and look away. There's something unnatural about it, they whisper, something that ain't right. But it's not just the speed. It's the way the notes seem to bend reality, the way a single string can sound like two instruments playing at once, the way his voice, high and urgent and breaking in all the right places, can make a man think about every woman he ever loved and lost, every choice he wishes he could take back, every dark road he's walked down and wondered if he'd make it home. Robert's eyes are closed now. His foot taps a rhythm that's slightly off from the beat his right hand is keeping, creating a tension that makes the room feel like it's holding its breath. The dancers have slowed. Some have stopped altogether, standing in the middle of the floor with their arms still around each other, frozen in the spell of whatever Robert Johnson has conjured from 6 strings and the Mississippi night. In the corner, near the door, a woman named Elizabeth stands with her back against the wall. She's 34, has 3 children waiting for her at her sister's house, and came here tonight to forget about the cotton fields and the bills and the husband who left 2 years ago without saying goodbye. She's been watching Robert for the better part of an hour, and something about him makes her uneasy in a way she can't name. It's not attraction, though he's handsome enough in that gaunt, haunted way some men have. It's something else. Something in the way he plays, like he's running from something that's right behind him. Something in the way he never looks at the audience, never smiles, never seems to be performing at all, but rather confessing, testifying, begging forgiveness from someone who isn't in the room. And there's the shadow. Elizabeth noticed it 20 minutes ago and has been trying to convince herself she's imagining it, that it's just the lamp smoke and the whiskey she's had and the late hour playing tricks on her mind. But every time Robert moves, every time he leans into a note or jerks his head back with his eyes squeezed shut, she sees it, a darkness behind him that doesn't match his movements quite right, that seems to lag a half-second behind, like something following him that isn't quite his own. The song ends. For 3 full seconds, nobody moves. Then the room erupts in hollers and applause, and Robert opens his eyes like a man waking from a dream he'd rather stay in. He doesn't smile. He just nods once, takes a long drink from the mason jar by his chair, and starts tuning his guitar for the next song. A man named Willie Brown pushes through the crowd. He's 42, been playing blues guitar since Robert was in short pants, and he's known this boy since Robert was just some kid hanging around Robinsonville getting laughed at for his clumsy playing. That was 3 years ago, maybe 4, before Robert disappeared. 4. Willie leans down, his breath smelling of tobacco and moonshine. The sound cuts through the room noise. Robert can barely hear. "My boy, you got to tell me." Willie's eyes are serious, searching. "Where'd you learn to play like that? Ain't possible for a man to get that good that fast without something." Robert doesn't look up, just keeps tuning the guitar, adjusting the pegs with those impossibly quick fingers. His voice when he speaks is quiet, almost swallowed by the noise around them. "Down at the crossroads, Willie. You know that." Willie straightens up, and something passes over his face. Fear, maybe, or recognition, or both. He pats Robert on the shoulder, but there's no warmth in it now. Just the gesture of a man who feels like he should touch someone before walking away. He returns to his spot across the room and doesn't look at Robert again for the rest of the night. Robert starts the next song. This one is faster, driving, his slide work screaming up and down the neck like a train whistle in the distance. Some of the dancers recover themselves and start moving again, but the mood has shifted. There's an edge to it now, something desperate and reckless, the kind of dancing people do when they want to outrun their thoughts. Elizabeth hasn't moved. She's still watching, and she's sure now there's something behind Robert Johnson that isn't natural. It's not a shadow exactly, because shadows don't move on their own. This thing, she can barely make out its shape in the lamp smoke and darkness, seems to crouch behind him when he bends over his guitar, seems to rise up when he throws his head back to sing. And once, just for a moment when Robert turns his head to take another drink, Elizabeth could swear she sees it looking at her. She leaves, pushes out through the door into the Mississippi night where the air is only slightly cooler and filled with the sound of crickets and distant dogs. Her heart is pounding, and she tells herself she's being foolish, that she had too much to drink and too little sleep, and her mind is playing tricks. But even as she walks down the dirt road toward where her sister lives 3 miles away, she can still hear Robert's guitar carrying across the fields, can still hear that voice singing about hellhounds and crossroads and debts that come due when you least expect them. Inside the Three Forks store, Robert plays until 2 in the morning. He makes $8 and drinks most of it. When the last people finally leave and the owner starts putting out the lamps, Robert packs his guitar in a battered case held together with rope and walks out into the darkness alone. He doesn't go straight to where he's staying. Instead, he walks down the road past cotton fields that stretch out like an ocean of darkness under the crescent moon, past shacks where oil lamps still burn in windows and he can hear babies crying and couples arguing and old people coughing. Past the church where he used to go with his mother before she died, before everything changed, before he learned what his talent would cost him. He stops at a crossroads, not the one from the stories. That's miles from here near a town called Clarksdale, where people say a man can sell his soul if he's desperate enough and willing to wait until midnight. But this one will do. All crossroads are the same in the dark, Robert thinks. All of them lead to somewhere you probably shouldn't go. He sits down in the dirt, right there in the middle of where the roads meet, and takes his guitar back out of the case. His fingers are sore, bleeding a little from the strings, but he doesn't care. He plays quietly now, just for himself. A melody that has no words and no beginning and no end, just notes hanging in the air like questions. A dog barks in the distance. Then another, then a whole chorus of them near and far, their voices rising in the night like they're warning each other about something coming. Robert stops playing and listens. The wind has picked up, moving through the cotton fields with a sound like whispered conversations. He knows what people say about him. He hears the rumors even when people think he can't, that he went to the crossroads at midnight with his guitar and met a large black man who took the instrument, tuned it, and handed it back. That in exchange for the ability to play anything he wanted, to make people feel things they didn't know they could feel, to create music that seemed to come from another world, Robert gave up something. His soul, some say. His future, others claim. His peace, his salvation, his chance at heaven. Robert doesn't correct them, let them think what they want. The truth is both simpler and more complicated than any story they could tell. The truth is that 3 years ago, Robert Johnson was nobody. A boy with clumsy fingers and a borrowed guitar who got laughed off every stage he tried to play on. The truth is that he left Robinsonville in shame and came back 8 months later able to play like nobody had ever heard. The truth is that he never explains how, never tells anyone what happened during those months, never confirms or denies the crossroads story that spread through the Delta like wildfire. And the truth is that since then, he's been running. Not from the law or a woman or a debt, at least not the kind you can pay with money. He's been running from something that's always just behind him, something he can feel watching him when he plays, something that grows stronger every time he picks up his guitar and creates magic from wood and wire. A shadow that followed him back from wherever he went during those 8 missing months. A shadow that sits with him on every stage, in every juke joint and street corner and room where people gather to hear him play. A shadow that reminds him always that nothing comes free, that talent like his has a price, that every note he plays is borrowed, and one day the loan will come due. Robert puts the guitar back in its case and stands up. His knees crack. He's 26 but feels older, much older, like he's lived several lifetimes in the span of a few years. He starts walking again, but he doesn't head toward the boarding house where he has a room. Instead, he walks toward the highway, his thumb out, ready to catch whatever truck or car might pass by even at this hour, because staying still is worse. Staying still means the shadow catches up. Staying still means thinking about what he's done and what it means, and whether there's any way back from the deal he made, whether anyone calls it a deal or a gift or a curse. So Robert Johnson walks, and behind him, invisible but present, something darker than the Mississippi night walks too. The next morning comes up slow and red over the delta. Robert is already 30 miles away, in a town whose name he doesn't know, drinking coffee that tastes like mud in a diner where the waitress eyes him with suspicion because of his clothes, his guitar, the way he keeps glancing over his shoulder at nothing she can see. He'll play tonight somewhere new. Different town, different faces, same gift, same curse. He'll make people feel things they've never felt before. He'll create music that will outlast him by decades, that will influence musicians who haven't been born yet, that will make people in futures he can't imagine wonder how one man with one guitar could channel so much beauty and pain and truth. But right now, sitting in this diner with morning light streaming through dirty windows, Robert Johnson is just tired. Tired of running, tired of playing, tired of the weight that sits on his shoulders like a physical thing, pressing down, reminding him that genius and damnation might be the same thing depending on how you look at it. The waitress refills his coffee without asking. She's seen men like him before, musicians passing through, gamblers on the run, sharecroppers who finally snapped and left their families in the middle of the night. Men with haunted eyes and restless hands, and the look of people who've made choices they can't take back. "Thank you," Robert says, and his voice is so soft she has to lean in to hear it. "You playing somewhere tonight?" she asks, not because she cares, but because conversation is part of the job, and the diner is empty except for him and an old man reading a newspaper by the window. "Probably," Robert says, "if there's somewhere to play." She nods, moves away to wipe down the counter. Through the window, Robert can see trucks heading toward the cotton fields, see workers beginning their day, see the sun climbing higher and burning off the morning cool. Normal people living normal lives. He wonders what that's like, if he ever had it, if he threw it away for 6 strings and a voice that can make strong men cry. He finishes his coffee and leaves 2 dimes on the counter. The guitar case feels heavier than it should when he picks it up, like there's more inside than just wood and wire. He pushes out through the door into the growing heat, and within minutes, he's got his thumb out again, ready to move to the next town, the next stage, the next night of running from the thing that's always right behind him. But before he walks away from the diner, before he starts hitchhiking down the highway toward whatever's next, Robert turns around once and looks back at his shadow on the ground. The sun is behind him, casting his silhouette long and dark across the dirt parking lot. He stares at it for a long moment, this shadow that looks like him, but might not be just him anymore. And maybe it's a trick of the light, or maybe it's the exhaustion, or maybe it's the truth he's been avoiding for 3 years, but for just a second, that shadow seems to move independent of his body. Just a small shift, a slight turn of what might be ahead, like something inside his shadow is looking back at him. Robert turns away quickly and starts walking. Behind him, the shadow follows. It always follows. 3 months pass. Robert moves through the Delta like smoke, never staying more than a few days in one place. He plays in Greenwood and Vicksburg and Itabena. He plays in Memphis for a week and makes enough money to buy a new suit and a bottle of whiskey that he drinks alone in a hotel room while staring at the wall. He plays in Helena and Clarksdale and a dozen towns too small to have names. Just crossroads with a store and a church and people hungry for music that makes them forget their lives for a few hours. Everywhere he goes, people talk, not just about his playing, though that's part of it. They talk about the intensity, the way he seems possessed when he performs, the way the air in the room changes when he starts singing. They talk about how he never seems happy, never celebrates even when the crowd goes wild, never jokes or laughs or acts like a man who's grateful for his gift. And some people, not many, but enough that the stories spread, talk about what they've seen or think they've seen. A darkness around him that doesn't quite match the lighting. A presence that seems to loom behind him when he's deep into a song. A feeling in the room like there's one more person present than there should be. Most people dismiss these stories. Superstition, they say, country ignorance, the kind of foolishness that comes from too much religion mixed with too much whiskey and too little education. But others, the ones who've been around the blues long enough to know that some things can't be explained, they just nod and keep their distance from Robert Johnson when he's not on stage. In early August, Robert ends up back in Robinsonville. He didn't plan it. He never plans anything beyond the next ride, the next meal, the next place to lay his head. But here he is, walking down the same dirt roads he walked as a child, past houses where people who knew his mother still live. He stops at a small white church with a tin roof that pings in the heat. The door is unlocked, it always is, and inside the air is cooler and smells like old wood and hymn books and the accumulated prayers of decades. Robert hasn't been inside a church since his mother's funeral 7 years ago. He told himself then that God had let her suffer too much, taken her too soon, and he was done with the whole business of faith and salvation. But now, standing in the empty sanctuary with his guitar case in his hand, Robert feels something crack open inside his chest. Not breaking exactly, more like opening, like a door he's kept locked for years suddenly coming loose. He sits in the back pew and puts the guitar case on the bench beside him. He doesn't open it, doesn't play, just sits in the quiet and lets the stillness settle around him like a blanket. Outside, he can hear birds and the wind moving through the trees and the distant sound of someone chopping wood. Normal sounds, human sounds. Sounds that have nothing to do with devils or crossroads or deals that damn a man's soul. Robert closes his eyes. He tries to pray, but the words won't come. He doesn't remember how, doesn't remember what you're supposed to say or how you're supposed to say it, or if God even listens to men like him anymore. Men who made choices, men who wanted something so badly they were willing to pay any price to get it. The silence stretches out. Minutes pass, maybe longer, and slowly, so slowly Robert almost doesn't notice at first. The weight on his shoulders begins to lighten, just a little, just enough that he can take a full breath without feeling like something is pressing down on his lungs. He opens his eyes. The church is still empty. The light coming through the windows is still golden and lazy with dust motes drifting in the shafts. Nothing has changed, and everything has changed. Robert stands up. He picks up his guitar case, walks to the front of the church, and sets it down at the foot of the pulpit. Then he turns and walks back up the aisle toward the door. He doesn't look back. Doesn't say goodbye to the instrument that's been both his salvation and his curse. He just leaves. Outside, the Mississippi heat hits him like a wall. He starts walking down the road, his hands empty for the first time in years, his shoulders feeling strangely light without the guitar case pulling them down. He doesn't have a plan, doesn't know where he's going or what he'll do when he gets there. All he knows is that he's tired of running, tired of the shadow. Tired of playing music that costs him pieces of his soul every time he touches the strings. He makes it half a mile before he stops. In the middle of the road, with cotton fields stretching out on both sides and no one around to see him, Robert Johnson stops walking and stands perfectly still. His hands start shaking, not with fear or cold, but with a hunger so deep it makes his bones ache, the hunger to play, to create, to channel whatever dark magic flows through him when his fingers touch guitar strings. He turns around and walks back to the church. The guitar case is still there, waiting at the front like it knew he'd return. Robert picks it up, and the weight of it feels like coming home. He opens the case right there in the church, takes out the guitar, and sits on the steps of the pulpit. He plays. Not one of his songs, not anything he's written or will write. Instead, he plays an old hymn his mother used to sing. Amazing Grace, but transformed by his hands into something both sacred and profane, both prayer and confession, both cry for help and acknowledgement that help might not come. His voice, when he starts singing, is different from how it sounds in the juke joints. Quieter, more fragile, like he's singing to an audience of one, and that one might be God, or might be the devil, or might be some part of himself he's been trying to forget. The shadow is still there. Robert can feel it even without looking, can sense its presence behind him like always. But for these few minutes, in this church where his mother prayed for his soul, Robert Johnson plays not to run from the shadow, but to acknowledge it, to say, I know you're there, I know what I did, I know the price, and I'm still here, still playing, still trying to create something beautiful out of the darkness. When the hymn ends, Robert sits in silence for a long moment. Then he puts the guitar back in its case, stands up, and walks out of the church. The shadow follows. It always follows. But maybe, Robert thinks as he walks back into the Mississippi afternoon, maybe that's okay. Maybe the shadow is just part of who he is now. Maybe genius and damnation and redemption and curse are all the same thing, and the only real choice is whether you run from it or turn around and face it and play your music anyway. Time passes. Summer turns to fall, fall to winter, winter to the next spring. Robert Johnson continues his journey through the Delta, playing in the same towns, different towns, anywhere someone will listen. His reputation grows. People come from miles away to hear him play. Record producers in Chicago and New York start hearing the stories, start putting out feelers about getting this mysterious bluesman into a studio. In November of 1936, Robert gets his chance. A talent scout named Ernie Ertel hears him playing in a joint outside of Jackson and knows immediately that this is something special, not just good, transcendent. The kind of music that comes along once in a generation if you're lucky. Arrangements are made. In late November, Robert travels to San Antonio, Texas for his first recording session. He's nervous but doesn't show it, just sits in the hotel room the record company paid for and practices until his fingers bleed. The songs are ready. They've been ready. Some of them have been ready for years, waiting for this moment. The recording session takes place in a small room in the Gunter Hotel. The equipment is new, sophisticated by the standards of 1936. Robert looks at the microphone like it might bite him. He's never recorded before, never heard his own voice played back to him, never had to perform without an audience giving him energy and feedback. The producer, Don Law, is patient. He understands that some artists need time to relax, to find their groove. He lets Robert tune his guitar for 20 minutes, lets him smoke 3 cigarettes, lets him pace around the room until finally, Robert sits down in front of the microphone and nods that he's ready. The first song they record is Kind-Hearted Woman Blues. Robert plays it through once, and Don Law sits in the control booth with his mouth slightly open, forgetting to take notes, forgetting to check levels, just listening. Because what's coming through the microphone isn't just music. It's something else, something that makes the hair on his arms stand up and his throat go tight. They record 16 songs over 3 days. Each one is a masterpiece. Each one captures something essential about the blues, about Mississippi, about what it means to be human and flawed and searching for redemption. Robert's voice on the recording sounds both ancient and immediate, like he's singing from a century ago and tomorrow at the same time. Between takes, Robert is quiet. He doesn't celebrate the good performances or get frustrated with the bad ones. He just plays over and over until Don Law tells him they've got it. Then he puts the guitar down, accepts the money he's owed, $35 per song, and disappears back into the Delta like a ghost. The recordings are released through 1937. They don't sell many copies at first. The blues is still considered race music, relegated to specific markets, not promoted widely. But among musicians, among the people who understand, the records spread like wildfire. Other guitarists listen to them and can't figure out how one man is creating the sounds of 2 or 3 instruments at once. Singers marvel at the emotional depth in Robert's voice. Songwriters study the poetry in his lyrics, the way he can tell entire stories in 3 verses. And some people, when they listen to the recordings late at night, when they're alone and the room is dark, swear they can hear something else underneath the music. Not a mistake in the recording, not static or interference, something else. A second voice maybe, or a presence, or the sound of something breathing just behind Robert as he sings. May 1938. Robert is back in Mississippi, back to playing juke joints and street corners, and anywhere someone will pay him $1 or $2. The recording session changed his life in some ways. He has a small but growing reputation, people who seek him out specifically, but in other ways, nothing has changed at all. He's still running, still carrying the shadow, still paying the price for whatever happened at whatever crossroads during those 8 missing months. He's playing a Saturday night dance at a place called Three Forks, the same store where Elizabeth saw the shadow 16 months ago. Different crowd tonight, but the same heat, the same smoke, the same hunger for music that makes people forget their troubles for a few hours. Robert is in rare form. His playing is sharp, precise, but also wild in a way that makes even the dancers pause to watch. He's singing about crossroads and hellhounds and women who leave, and trains that carry you away from everything you've ever known. The crowd is mesmerized. Some people are crying, some are dancing like they're trying to exorcise demons. Some just stand and stare like they're witnessing something they don't have words for. In the middle of Sweet Home Chicago, Robert stops playing, just stops mid-verse, his hands frozen on the guitar. His eyes are fixed on something at the back of the room, something nobody else can see. His breathing becomes shallow, rapid. Sweat runs down his face, but it's not from the heat. The crowd doesn't understand what's happening. Some people laugh nervously, some call out, asking if he's okay. The owner of the store starts walking toward him, concerned. Robert stands up so fast, his chair falls backwards with a crash. He clutches his guitar to his chest like a shield and backs away from the microphone. His lips are moving, but no sound comes out. He looks terrified, absolutely terrified, like he's seeing his own death walking toward him across the floorboards. Then as suddenly as it started, the moment passes. Robert's eyes refocus. He looks around at the confused crowd, at the owner standing halfway across the room, at the overturned chair behind him. He sets the guitar in its case carefully, precisely, like he's handling something fragile. Then he walks out of the store without a word, without his money, without even closing the guitar case. Nobody follows him. Something about the look on his face, the wild fear in his eyes, makes people want to give him space. "Let him go," the owner says when someone suggests going after him. "Let him go. Whatever that boy saw ain't none of our business." Robert walks into the Mississippi night for the last time. He's still alive, will be for 4 more months, but something has changed. Something has ended, or begun, or both. The shadow that's been following him for 3 years has caught up, not to take him, not yet, but to remind him that it's there, that it's always been there, that the debt will come due. He wanders through the Delta for the rest of May and into June, playing less frequently, drinking more, growing thinner and more haunted with each passing week. People who see him say he looks like a man running out of time, like someone who's seen the end coming and doesn't know whether to run toward it or away from it. In mid-August, Robert is playing at a juke joint near Greenwood called Three Forks. Different Three Forks from the one in Robinsonville, but the same name, like the universe is reminding him of something. He's staying with the owner of the place, a man named Ralph, who thinks Robert is good for business and doesn't mind that he's strange and quiet and barely eats. On August 13th, Robert plays a Saturday night dance. The crowd is small but enthusiastic. He performs his songs, the ones he recorded, the ones he hasn't recorded, the ones he's never played for anyone but himself. His playing is as brilliant as ever, maybe more so, like he's burning through the last of something finite and precious. Afterward, a woman gives him a bottle of whiskey. It's already opened, but Robert doesn't think anything of it. He's been given opened bottles 100 times before. He drinks from it between songs, shares it with a couple of men who are hanging around the stage area, drinks more when the dancing is done and the crowd is filtering out into the night. Within an hour, Robert is sick, not regular drunk sick, something worse. His stomach cramps, his vision blurs, his hands shake so badly he can barely hold on to his guitar. Ralph helps him to the back room, lays him on a cot, brings him water that Robert can't keep down. For 3 days, Robert Johnson lies in that back room, getting sicker and sicker. Sometimes he's delirious, calling out names of people who aren't there, singing fragments of songs, praying in a voice so hoarse and desperate it makes the people who hear it want to run from the room. Sometimes he's lucid, staring at the ceiling with eyes that see something the rest of them can't. On the third day, August 16th, Robert sits up suddenly. His eyes are clear for the first time in days, and he looks around the room at Ralph and the others who've been watching over him. There's a dog barking somewhere outside, and Robert listens to it for a long moment, like it's trying to tell him something important. "I got to meet him," Robert says, and his voice is so quiet they almost can't hear it. Old man, big man at the crossroads. He's waiting. Nobody knows what he means. They try to get him to lie back down, to drink some water, to rest, but Robert just shakes his head slowly, that small movement seeming to take all his strength. "He told me I'd have 7 years, Robert says. Gave me everything I wanted, best guitar player that ever was. But 7 years, that was the deal." He lies back down and closes his eyes. His breathing becomes labored, wet, rattling in his chest. The people in the room look at each other, not knowing what to do, whether to believe what they're hearing or dismiss it as fever dreams. Robert Johnson dies on August 16th, 1938, at 27 years old. The official cause is unknown. Poisoning is suspected, probably strychnine in the whiskey, probably put there by a jealous husband or an enemy he made somewhere along his travels. His death certificate lists the cause simply as no doctor. No autopsy is performed. He's buried in an unmarked grave somewhere near Greenwood. The exact location lost to time because nobody bothered to note it down with any precision. His guitar, that instrument he played so brilliantly, so impossibly well, disappears. Some say it was buried with him. Some say it was sold to pay for his funeral. Some say it was taken by the shadow that followed him all those years, claimed as payment for services rendered. In the months and years after his death, Robert Johnson becomes a legend. His recordings, which sold maybe 5,000 copies while he was alive, begin to circulate more widely. Musicians hear them and are transformed. Young men in Chicago and Memphis and London and New York pick up guitars and try to play like Robert Johnson, try to capture even a fraction of that magic. They never quite can. Something about Robert's playing remains inimitable, untouchable, like he was accessing something the rest of them simply don't have permission to reach. Some call it genius. Some call it the blues at its purest form. Some call it evidence of a deal that should never have been made. Decades pass. Robert Johnson's influence spreads like roots from a tree, touching everything that comes after. Rock and roll, they'll call it eventually, this music that grew from the Delta blues. Eric Clapton will learn to play by listening to Robert's recordings. Keith Richards will cite him as a primary influence. Bob Dylan will make a pilgrimage to Robert's supposed grave. Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, B.B. King, all of them will acknowledge the debt they owe to this thin man who died at 27 with a shadow at his back. The Crossroads story becomes part of American mythology. People debate whether it's true, whether Robert Johnson really met the devil at midnight, whether supernatural intervention explains his impossible talent. Scholars trace the story's roots to African American folklore, to tales of Papa Legba and other trickster spirits, to the long tradition of musicians making deals with powers beyond their understanding. But the people who saw Robert play, who were there in those juke joints and street corners and recording sessions, they don't need to debate. They know what they saw. Not a man who sold his soul, necessarily, but a man who was willing to pay any price for his art. A man who ran from something his whole short life. A man who was brilliant and haunted in equal measure. And sometimes late at night, when musicians are alone in their practice rooms or standing on stage with a guitar in their hands, they'll swear they feel something, a presence, a shadow, the ghost of Robert Johnson maybe, still playing somewhere in the darkness, still running from the thing that caught up to him in that back room in Greenwood, still paying the price for 7 years of genius. The recordings remain. 29 songs captured in 2 sessions, preserved forever in wax and then digital code. 29 windows into the soul of a man who touched something most people never get near. Listen to them today. Crossroad Blues, Love in Vain, Hellhound on My Trail, and you'll hear it. The urgency, the fear, the brilliance. The sound of someone playing like his life depends on it, because maybe it did. You'll hear the delta in those recordings, the heat and the poverty, and the cotton fields stretching to the horizon. You'll hear the Mississippi night, full of crickets and stars and things moving in the darkness that don't have names. You'll hear one man with one guitar creating sounds that shouldn't be possible, bending reality with nothing but wood and wire and a voice that knows every human emotion and isn't afraid to name them. And if you listen very carefully, late at night, in a dark room with good headphones, you might hear something else too. Underneath the guitar and the voice, behind the lyrics about crossroads and hellhounds and women leaving on trains, you might hear breathing that isn't Robert's, footsteps that don't match the rhythm, a presence that suggests Robert Johnson wasn't alone in those recording sessions after all. But maybe that's just your imagination. Maybe it's the power of the story, the legend, making you hear things that aren't there. Maybe it's the music itself working on your mind, creating pictures and feelings and fears that come from somewhere inside you rather than from the recordings. Or maybe, and this is what the old blues musicians will tell you if you ask them late at night, when they've had enough whiskey to speak honestly, maybe Robert Johnson really did make a deal. Maybe he really did meet something at a crossroads. Maybe he really was followed for 7 years by a shadow that demanded payment in the end. Maybe the price of genius is always too high. Maybe some doors, once opened, can't be closed. Maybe every artist knows this on some level, feels the weight of whatever shadow follows them, wonders if what they create is worth what it costs. Robert Johnson knew. You can hear it in every song, every note, every desperate vocal plea. He knew he was paying for his talent with something essential and irreplaceable. He knew the shadow was there. He knew it was following him. He knew eventually it would catch up. And on August 16, 1938, in a back room of a juke joint in Mississippi, it did. The years after Robert's death are quiet. His mother is already gone. He has no wife, no legitimate children, no estate to speak of. His recordings belong to the record company. His guitar is missing. His grave is unmarked. For a while, it seems like Robert Johnson might disappear completely, fade into the Delta dust like thousands of other bluesmen who lived hard and died young and left nothing behind but stories. But the recordings don't fade. They persist. They survive. In the 1960s, when young white musicians start discovering the blues, when rock and roll is searching for its roots and its authenticity, Robert Johnson's name resurfaces. The recordings are reissued. Suddenly, musicians who grew up in London's suburbs and California beaches are studying these scratchy recordings from 1936 and 1937, trying to understand how one man created such complex, powerful music. Eric Clapton hears King of the Delta Blues Singers in 1963 and later says it's the most powerful music he's ever encountered. The Rolling Stones cover Love in Vain. Led Zeppelin borrows from Traveling Riverside Blues. The Allman Brothers cream Fleetwood Mac. All of them drink from the well that Robert Johnson dug. And the Crossroads story spreads. It becomes part of rock mythology. This idea that you can trade something precious for talent, that genius comes with a price, that the greatest artists are somehow marked by darkness. People debate it endlessly. Scholars write papers. Filmmakers make documentaries. The Crossroads near Clarksdale becomes a tourist destination, with a marker and a museum, and people taking selfies at the spot where Robert supposedly met the devil. But none of that would have happened if the music wasn't real, if it wasn't genuine, if Robert Johnson hadn't somehow, through whatever means, tapped into something universal and eternal and true. The legend grew because the art justified it. The story spread because the songs earned it. November 2024. A young guitarist named Marcus sits in a practice room in Brooklyn, New York, working on a song he's been writing. He's 24, talented but struggling, can't quite break through to the next level. He can play technically well, knows all the right chords and scales, but something is missing. The spark, the magic, the thing that makes people stop scrolling and actually listen. He's been studying Robert Johnson for the past 6 months, listening to the recordings over and over, reading everything he can find about the man and the music and the legend. Not because he believes the Crossroads story. Marcus is too rational, too modern, too educated to believe in deals with the devil, but because he wants to understand how one man with limited resources created something so powerful, it still resonates 90 years later. It's 3 a.m. Marcus has been playing for 5 hours straight and his fingers are sore. He's been working on a riff, trying to capture some of that Robert Johnson feel, that sense of 2 guitars playing at once, that tension between the bass line and the melody that creates such rich, complex sounds. And then something happens. His fingers find a pattern they didn't know before. The notes start flowing in a way they haven't before. For 30 seconds, maybe a minute, Marcus isn't thinking about what he's playing. He's just playing, channeling something from somewhere deeper than technique or knowledge or practice. It's the best thing he's ever created. He knows it immediately. He can feel it. This is the breakthrough he's been searching for. And then he stops. Because for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, Marcus sees something in the mirror across the room. Not his own reflection exactly. His reflection is there, but there's something else too. A darkness behind his shoulder that seems thicker than it should be, that seems to move independently. Marcus blinks, and it's gone. Just his reflection staring back at him, guitar in hand, exhausted face lit by the single lamp in the practice room. He tells himself he's tired, that he's been playing too long, that his mind is playing tricks. But his hands are shaking slightly as he puts the guitar down, and he doesn't pick it up again that night. The next day, Marcus tells himself it was nothing. Fatigue, imagination, the power of suggestion from spending so much time thinking about Robert Johnson and Crossroads and deals with darkness. He goes back to the practice room, picks up his guitar, and tries to recreate what he played the night before. He can't. The magic is gone. His fingers remember the pattern, but the feeling isn't there. It's just notes now, just technique, just another guitarist playing another riff. Whatever he touched last night has slipped away. Marcus doesn't know if this is how it started for Robert Johnson, if there was a moment when something shifted, when the playing went from ordinary to extraordinary, when a door opened that maybe shouldn't have been opened. He doesn't know if Robert felt the same thing Marcus felt. That combination of exhilaration and fear of touching something powerful and wondering what it will cost. What Marcus does know is that he wants to feel it again. That 30 seconds of pure, channeled creativity, that sense of playing something larger than himself, and that knowledge scares him more than the shadow he thinks he saw in the mirror. Because maybe that's how it always starts, with desire, with hunger, with the willingness to pay any price to create something that matters, something that lasts, something that makes people feel and think and remember. Maybe Robert Johnson wasn't special because he made a deal at a crossroads. Maybe he was special because he was willing to. Because when presented with the choice between safety and greatness, between a comfortable life and a legendary one, between keeping his soul intact and creating art that would outlast him by centuries, Robert chose the art. And maybe that's the real story. Not the supernatural elements, not the devil or the crossroads or the mysterious shadow. Maybe the real story is about a man who wanted something so badly he was willing to sacrifice everything for it, who understood on some deep level that the price of genius is always too high and chose to pay it anyway. The shadow that followed Robert Johnson to every stage, that sat behind him in every recording session, that walked with him down every Delta road. Maybe it wasn't a demon or a curse or the devil's mark. Maybe it was just the weight of his own choices, the knowledge that he'd traded peace for power, comfort for creativity, a long life for an immortal one. Maybe every artist carries that shadow. Maybe everyone who creates something real and true and lasting pays the price in their own way. Some in health, some in relationships, some in sanity, some in years cut short. The form changes, but the principle remains the same. Nothing worthwhile comes free. Robert Johnson knew this. You can hear it in every song. The joy of creation mixed with the sorrow of cost, the triumph of talent shadowed by the price of possession. He knew what he was paying, and he paid it willingly. And he left behind music that still moves people to tears, and still inspires guitarists to practice until their fingers bleed, and still makes people wonder how one man with one guitar could capture so much of what it means to be human. In some small church in Mississippi, there's probably still a wooden pew where Robert Johnson sat one afternoon and tried to leave his guitar behind, where he tried to walk away from the gift and the curse and the shadow that followed, where he made it half a mile before the hunger brought him back. That's the moment that matters. Not the crossroads at midnight, not the deal with the devil, but that moment of choice when Robert realized he couldn't walk away, that the music was part of him now, that the shadow was his whether he wanted it or not. He picked up the guitar. He went back to playing. He recorded 29 songs that changed music forever. He died at 27 with nothing to his name but a reputation and a shadow and songs that would outlast the century. And somewhere in the Delta night, if you listen carefully, you can still hear it. The sound of a guitar played by impossible hands. The voice of a man singing about crossroads and hellhounds and debts that come due. The echo of Robert Johnson still running, still playing, still paying the price for 7 years of genius that bought him eternity. The shadow follows, it always follows, but the music remains. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the trade Robert made, not his soul for talent, but his peace for permanence. Not salvation for skill, but comfort for immortality. The recordings play on, in coffee shops and college dorms and vintage record stores and streaming services, on vinyl and CD and digital files. The same 29 songs, captured in 2 sessions in 1936 and 1937, played by a man who's been dead for more than 80 years, but whose voice still sounds urgent and immediate and alive. New musicians discover him every year. Some are transformed. Some are inspired. Some hear the stories and wonder what they would be willing to trade for that kind of talent. Some hear the music and understand that no trade is necessary, that the shadow finds everyone who's serious about their art, that the price gets paid whether you make a deal or not. Robert Johnson made his choice. He walked to the crossroads, literal or metaphorical, and he came back changed. He played music that nobody had played before. He created sounds that still seem impossible. He influenced every guitarist who came after him. He died young and poor and alone, but he left behind something that can't die, can't be poor, can't be alone, because millions of people carry it with them. And that shadow, the thing that followed him from juke joint to juke joint, from recording session to street corner to the back room where he died. Maybe it was never about damnation. Maybe it was about dedication. Maybe it was the physical manifestation of what it costs to create something real. Maybe every artist who's ever made something that matters carries a version of that shadow. And the only real question is whether you run from it or turn around and acknowledge it and create your art anyway. Robert ran, but he also played, and in the end, the playing is what remains. So if you're listening to this story and you're an artist of any kind, musician, writer, painter, creator, and you're wondering if genius is worth the price, if talent justifies the sacrifice, if art can redeem the cost of creating it, listen to Robert Johnson. Really listen. Not just to the mythology, not just to the Crossroads legend, but to the music itself. Listen to the pain in his voice, the joy in his guitar work, the complexity of his compositions, the depth of his poetry, the raw, unfiltered truth of a man who touched something most people never get near and paid everything to hold on to it for 7 years. Then decide for yourself if the shadow is worth it, if the trade is fair, if immortality through art justifies mortality in life. Robert Johnson decided it was. Every time he picked up his guitar, every time he walked into a juke joint or sat in front of a microphone, every time he played another note, sang another line, created another moment of beauty, pulled from darkness, the shadow followed him to the stage, every performance, every moment of creation, and Robert played anyway. That's the story, that's the truth beneath the legend. That's what matters. Not the crossroads, not the deal, not the devil or the darkness or the mythology that grew up around a thin man with impossible hands and a voice that could break your heart. Just this: Robert Johnson was willing to pay the price, and the music he created in exchange for whatever he paid echoes still across decades and continents and genres, a permanent reminder that some things are worth the cost, that art can transcend the artist, that genius leaves marks that outlast the mortal body that housed it. The shadow is still there, somewhere in the Delta night, following, waiting, reminding everyone who hears these songs that nothing comes free, that talent demands payment, that the crossroads, real or metaphorical, always extracts its due. But so is the music, still playing, still transforming, still inspiring people to pick up guitars and try to touch whatever Robert touched, even knowing the cost, even feeling the shadow, even understanding that the price might be too high. Because that's what artists do. They see the shadow, they feel the weight, they know the cost, and they create anyway. If you found yourself drawn into Robert Johnson's story today, if you felt the weight of his choices and the power of his music, consider subscribing to this channel. We dive deep into the souls of music's most legendary and complicated figures, the ones who paid prices we can barely imagine for art that changed the world. Hit that like button if this story moved you, and share it with someone who needs to hear about the cost of genius and the courage it takes to create despite the shadows. Robert Johnson's 29 songs are still out there, waiting for you to discover or rediscover them. Listen with the knowledge of what they cost. Listen with respect for the man who paid the price. Listen with an understanding that you're hearing something precious and rare and bought with currency that can't be measured in money or fame or conventional success. Listen to the shadow. Listen to the man running from it. Listen to the music he created while running, and then decide for yourself what you're willing to pay for your own art, your own truth, your own immortality. The crossroads is still there. Not just in Mississippi, not just at midnight, but in every moment when an artist has to choose between safety and greatness, between comfort and truth, between keeping their soul intact and creating something that will outlast their body. Robert Johnson made his choice. The shadow followed him to the stage. The music remains, and somewhere in the darkness, the echo of his guitar still plays, still asks the question that every artist must eventually answer. What are you willing to pay to create something that matters? Listen to Robert Johnson, really listen. The answer is in the music.